What are the best paints for acrylic pouring and fluid art to use? And it's actually a little bit of a hard question to answer, but I wanted to make this video to try to explain to you a little bit of why I use the paints and the brands that I use. But I wanted to use this video to kind of go through a few things, but kind of the lowdown up front on it is it's going to depend on your location, what brands you have available, how much you want to spend, where you are in your art journey, how you are selling them, and how many you're making every day. And do you want dependability and reproducibility in your work? So it's really going to depend on a bunch of different factors. I'm going to try to break some of them down for you in this video. So I'm going to take you over to my paints and show you those. So let me flip the camera around. So I use primarily Amsterdam, but I also have Pebeo brand. I have a bunch of different pouring mediums. Over here, I also have some Soho brand. I have Deco Art brand. I have Creative Inspiration brand, Arteza. I can tell you a little bit about what some of the properties are that you could look for in a brand if you're just starting out, or maybe I can teach you some things about some brands that you already have. So I'm gonna go grab some off of the shelf and then I'll get down to my table and we can discuss them. Phew! All right, there are a bunch of different brands to actually think about here. And this is definitely not even all of them. So I have and use all of these different paints in my studio, but I have certain ones that I use more often than others just because they're more predictable. But I thought I would go through just a few of the brands that are out there. Now, I do not have the time or money to buy every single brand for the video, but just know that it may be completely different depending on where you live. Some countries even have different brands. I know in Australia, there are some different brands of paint. There's, I believe, Montmartre and a few other ones. I don't have any Master's Touch here from the USA. I don't have any ready pour acrylics, and I'll talk about those in a second. But I thought, let me just talk a little bit about the brands, a little bit about the paint properties that you can look for, depending on what you want to do, and then I'll get into answering some of those questions. So, Amsterdam is one that I use often, and it is really predictable. I love Amsterdam brand. I love the colors that they provide, and this is the standard acrylic version, and it is mostly a medium range price, a decent price for the amount that you get. So like this bottle, a 500 ml bottle will get me around, I would say, $25 or so, maybe a little bit less. But this bottle can either make up a 64 ounce jug of a little bit less than a 64 ounce jug of pouring medium and paint mixed together, about I would say 1,200 milliliters of paint and water if I'm using it. So it's going to depend on the pouring medium that you use as well. But this is one that I use quite often. Soho and Creative Inspirations are, let me move all these kind of back a little bit to the side. Soho is a brand, Soho and Creative Inspirations I get from a place called Jerry's Artarama online. Unfortunately, they are closing a lot of their stores down, the brick and mortar stores. So I'm having, that was open. So I am having to order it all online instead of going to a physical store, which I loved so much. It was like being in a candy shop. All right, so I've got my Amsterdam colors there. I have so many others over here on the side. And you'll see, hopefully by the end of the video, I don't want to overwhelm you, but I want you to be able to understand how and why there are so many different versions. Okay, my last couple here, I'll just move over to the side for now. And I want to grab a regular golden as well. Oh no, I've got it over here. I had already prepared myself. Okay, so my other two that I use quite often are Creative Inspirations here and Soho. So hopefully you can see the labels of them here. Creative Inspirations is probably, besides Artist Loft Flow Acrylic, probably the least expensive. Although I will say over the past 8 years, man, has this gotten more expensive. And my PSA, because I'm not sponsored by any of these companies, my PSA is Jerry's Artorama. Lower your prices for your back to what they used to be. But this used to be like $18 for this entire jug. It is now much more expensive than that. You have to get it on sale. Soho is another brand that I use. So the Creative Inspirations and the Soho, they are cell reactive. I'll show you what that means in a little bit, but I do like to use them, but I use them in specific ways. Each of these paints has properties to it that I use them for specific effects. The Artist Loft Flow Acrylic is a very economical paint. I get it from Michael's, which is a store here in the US. It looks like that. They have reformulated, and this gives you lots of cells if you use it as a base. So that is also something to think about. We'll get into that with the dependability part of things. As far as ones that I don't use that often, simply because I don't see a need for them for the type of art acrylic pouring that I do for the price of what they actually are. And that is Tri-Art. Tri-Art and Golden are the most expensive that I have here. And if I'm mixing them with other mediums, I don't really need a super expensive type paint. And also there's the Tri-Art one. And also, they react when I mix them up, they react almost the same, and some of them worse than if I were using one of the student grade or medium grade paints. And then there is Atelier as well. Another one so these are ones that I don't use that often that are expensive. Another one that I use really often is Winsor and Newton. So I get these, oops, they're both upside down. I get these from, you can get them at Michael's, you can get them off Amazon. I used to get them off Amazon, but now Michael's and Blix has them. This little tube here is a 60 ml tube, and I think it is around $5 or $6. And then they have the bigger tubes as well, but these are very predictable as well. They do not create cells at all by themselves. So that is something to keep in mind, but I use that to my advantage. Then going up the line here, now I've got, and this is not in best to worst type paints at all. So I have Artist Loft here, I have Blix, I have Liquitex Basics. I think this is Liquitex Basics as well. So these paints work perfectly fine for regular acrylic pouring. I've actually done a series on paint and water acrylic pouring as well, and I've tested out a lot of these brands. I'll link that in the description. I would watch that series if you're wanting to know specifically for paint and water, but I'm just talking about in general for these when you're mixing them with a pouring medium, kind of how they'll react. But these are all viable options for you. These are honestly about the same price. They're like medium priced paints, but these you could use as well. Oh, I don't use them as often, so I'm gonna keep them over here. Arteza is one that I used to use all the time, and they would actually send me products, but alas, they have stopped as well. Arteza, they have a gorgeous range of colors, and they are pretty predictable paints. I personally just find that they're a little expensive for acrylic pouring. But when I have a certain color that I'm looking for, that I don't, want to try to figure out to make, I will grab a specific color of arteza as well. So I do use those sometimes. Liquitex Professional. So I showed you Liquitex Basics, but Liquitex Professional, I really like this one for paint and water, but it is very much so expensive. And so this little tube, it will last quite a while. You can make, what is this, a 60, so it's a 2 fluid ounces. So, I mean, you could make, a 10-ounce cup of paint out of this. But again, it's going to be much more expensive, but more predictable. And I love Golden and Liquitex Professional if I'm doing brushwork painting. I do love these two brands. So I do use those. And Golden is one of the most expensive, but they are, in my opinion, one of the best brands on the market for paints. And they are very expensive, but they have such a great color line, and the way that they label their colors is very, I'm going to say transparent, but I don't mean opaque versus transparent. I mean, they tell you everything that you need to know on their labeling. So they have a lot of detailed information. If you want to try to mix a color, they list the pigments that they use on the color itself. They have tons of information on their website online. So I definitely like Golden's brand as well. Golden has a heavy body acrylic. They also have like a fluid acrylic. So you'll have to think, what do I want to do as my technique for what type of paint I'm going to use? And we'll get into that. Pebeo also has a beautiful line of acrylics, and they are a little bit harder to find, honestly. Blix has them online, but they are a bit harder to find. If I remember, I will write a little list of my favorite items at Blix and leave it under the video as well. But they are a pretty cool brand, and they have lots of like iridescent colors and things like that. So I do like Pebeo. Again, this was just another, I don't use these as much, even though you can, but this is another Golden brand, and they have different, and now that I have the 3 of them, maybe I'll do a little example. These have different viscosities, which we can talk about. And then my last one is Deco Art here, and this brand is, I use this for a very specific effect for a pearl effect, and I use it in my Dream Cloud series. And I have a playlist on that if you haven't seen it. So Deco Art, this is one that I use for a specific effect that it has. So these are just some of the brands that are out there. And now that I have like clouded your mind with all of these options, I want to break it down to make it a little bit easier for you. And if I was you, I would group them into which ones are expensive, which ones are student grade or professional, which ones work for certain techniques, and really be a little bit systematic about it if you can, and which one causes certain effects, and then which ones can you get or purchase. I am not going to go into craft paint because craft paint for me is very unpredictable, unreliable. It cracks and breaks. And what I mean by craft paint are like the Apple Barrel brand, the Craftsman brand, in my opinion, from Michaels. The paints that are really watery, less pigmented, those paints are just not going to perform well. They're going to crack and break, even if you put a bunch of pouring medium into them. The colors are muted. They will, fade out faster. Their light fastness is not as good. So I just stay away normally from craft paint. Deco Art, I will say, they have an entire line, not this satin enamel, but they have an entire line of paint, and their paints are a little bit more predictable. They're very cell reactive, but they are a bit more predictable. So they are a craft paint, but that's the only one that I would say, grab up some bottles of those if you want. But I'm going to clear off a few of these to the side, and then we will come back and kind of talk a little bit more about these. Before I get into the golden viscosity, show you some of the viscosities of the paint, I wanted to first kind of talk about what is acrylic paint, what's it made of, right? So acrylic paint is made up of a pigment of some kind. So if you think about like a mica powder or some type of powdered pigment normally, a solid form type pigment, that is then mixed with some type of emulsion, a polymer emulsion, to suspend it and add water to it to make it like a creamy paint that you see. So you have acrylic binders that create the emulsion with the either, mica powders or other types of pigments to create the actual paint. And then sometimes there are some fillers, and then there's an amount of water that's added. And every brand that we've talked about here has their own recipe for how that's made. They may be a little bit different in the chemical binder that they use. They may use multiple binders. They may use a sheen additive to make it matte or glossy. Sometimes even within a specific brand, some of those paints could be matte or glossy. So if you really like a brand and you buy a lot of their colors, I would create a little color swatch sheet so that you can see how they dry, what their viscosity is, how the colors are once they dry, because they darken a little bit once the binders that are in there and the fillers dry. They normally dry transparent and the color darkens a little bit. So I would do like a little sheet for all of that so that you can really start to understand the brands that you're using. So the paint is created that way. Each brand has a little bit different of a formula, and they don't always list what that formula is, but because they're a little bit different, each one reacts a little bit different. So in my experience, I find that this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one is kind of in the middle here. So these paints right here are very cell reactive paints. They, even when mixed with pouring medium, they create cells if a color is dragged over top of them, or if they are mixed with floetrol. These are cell reactive paints, meaning they create cells just based off of the chemical properties of the mixture themselves. And that sounds great because everybody always wants cells and lacing and acrylic pouring. But if that's not what you're going for, or if your base is made out of these things, then, and where's my Pebbios here, then that may not be what you want, because you want to be able to control the uncontrollable, right? So acrylic pouring, I say it's controlled chaos, because while there are some things that are unpredictable, when you've been doing this for a long time, you want to be predictable. You want to do commissions. You want to have a little bit of control. And so using sometimes these brands of paint sometimes can cause unwanted cell reactions. So it's really important to understand exactly how they react. Liquitex I have in the middle because it does create cells, but it's not that many. And so I use this a lot of times as an accent color because it does create cells, but it's not as many cells as these paints create. Arteza, I would say, is it is pretty cell reactive. So I would label Arteza next to the Liquitex, but it's not that much. And then honestly, the rest, and then I would put this over here too. So cell reactive paints, pretty medium, not as cell reactive, but still can create some cells. And then really a lot of these are kind of middle of the road, I would say. Artist Loft, this one, Blix, and then the rest of these really don't create a lot of cells. And Winsor and Newton do not create a lot of cells at all, but I love them for that. They're very predictable. And then the Amsterdam Titanium White is like the white sheep of the group. I don't even know if that's a thing, but it creates cells when it's mixed with all kinds of different brands. But if you mix all Amsterdam together, then you get no cells. So clear as mud, clear as mud. All right, so those are the paints if you wanted to group them together for how cell reactive they are. I talked a little bit about how expensive they are. So least expensive, most expensive are going to be, most expensive is TriArt for sure. I bought the TriArt for that example of the paint and water video that I did, and I have not purchased any of it since, and probably won't be. Golden is probably next most expensive, and then the Liquitex Professional series, and then really the rest of these are pretty middle of the road. I did say that I would talk a little bit about ready pour paints, and no offense to any artist or company that is making ready pour paints, but for me personally, I have tried a bunch of different brands of ready pour paints, and you cannot control the transparency of them. You don't know how much medium they have added to them, and it's very hard to control the consistency of them. And when they're mixed with different brands, because you don't know what pouring mediums are in them, I have had paintings that have cracked and broken because of I've mixed them together. So I do think it's very important to know what you're mixing your paints with, and so the caveat that I would say there is if you are just starting out, say it's your very first time that you're making a painting, start on a small painting, grab some ready pour paints and pour them out and just have fun with it. If you want to actually try to hone your skills, because this art form takes a lot of practice, no matter what people say. I have people online all the time, oh, a child could do this. And sure, I could also give a child a paintbrush and they could paint something on a canvas. But to get something cohesive and have a good composition to it and choose the right colors, all of that, you have to do that with this art form as well to create a cohesive painting or even a collection. So if you're going to use ready pour paints, I say go right ahead and have fun. I'm never going to be the artist that tells you you should or shouldn't use something specific. But I do think once you graduate into, if you like it and you want to go further, I would definitely start to pick a couple brands that you like and start to mix your own paints. I won't go into pouring mediums in this video. I don't want it to be 5 hours long. But just know that, mixing your own paints has a lot more rewards to it than using ready pour paints. I've had paints that I end up seeing down through to the canvas, and people email me and say, hey, I'm not getting the results and I'm using these paints. And I tell them, you're not getting those results because you're not using the pouring mediums that I'm using. And your thickness is, the consistency is too thin. They're not thick enough. So it all matters. It all goes into what you should choose. So I talked a lot about, or a little about what acrylic paint is made of. And that becomes important when you're deciding on the technique you want to do. So knowing the chemical properties of the paints that you're using, whether they're cell reactive, whether they create pearl cells, those things are important once you figure out what technique you want to do. If I'm using paint and water, my favorite brands, the best acrylic paints for me to use are these paints. Actually, I'll say it this way. These paints for the base and the colors. And then I choose what color cells I want. And I use a cell reactive paint for those mixed with Winsor & Newton or Liquitex. So I change the concentration of my paint for how cell reactive it is. And I use a predictable paint for the base. You could use golden for the base. You could use Liquitex Basics for the base of your painting. Doesn't matter the color either. But something that is not as cell reactive, you want to use for the base of your painting at least. But I love these combinations of paints together to make them cell reactive. So that's for paint and water. If I am doing a Dream Cloud series where I have the paints and I have that in a playlist. If I am doing a Dream Cloud series, I use Amsterdam for my colors, and then I use these two colors for the base, or one of my other colors that I have back here in Deco Art Satin or Metallic. And I use these mixed with my pouring medium, and then whatever metallics and colors I want to use for the inside of the painting. But this has a specific reaction for pearl cells that I love and that I use. So I use solely these two things for that. Okay, let me see here. For ring pours, straight pours, for, thicker techniques that you're doing, any of these paints will work. It's just based on their properties. So I know that you probably clicked on this video wanting to know what is the best. And I don't really think there is necessarily a best. I think it depends on those things that we talked about at the beginning of the video, to say that, you have to think about a lot of factors. There, in my opinion, are some best paints to use as a base, best paints to use if you want cells, best paints to use if you want pearl cells, best paints to use for paint and water. And so there is no real right or wrong answer for that. I did want to show you a couple of different things. So I am going to get set up and have you down on the canvas, but I want to show you, I don't have any canvas, but on the paper. But I will show you a viscosity test, because not only do these brands have what I have on the table, they may also have a high flow version or a regular version. So we can talk about that really quick. And then I have a couple of paints already mixed up. I wanted to show you which ones are cell reactive and which ones are not. So let me get you down on the table for that. Okay, so for this, I'm just going to show you the viscosity. So you can think about it kind of like how thick or thin are these paints. So this is nickel azo gold. I don't want to use a lot of this because this is a very pretty color. But this is their regular artist colors by Golden, and it is the heavy body acrylics. So they also have a brand of their fluid acrylics, right? And we call fluid art, right? So people think, okay, can I use this by itself? But their fluid acrylics, let me shake it first. They are fluid and they can be used, but I find their consistency sometimes to be just a tiny bit too thin. And this bottle is really expensive. So to just think, oh my gosh, if I use 5 ounces of a paint inside the painting for the colors, this is 4 ounces. I would be spending like $40 on just the one color. So I choose not to use them as just fluid acrylics, but it is an option. If you have unlimited money, I would say go right ahead. Actually, let me shake this one too. Funny story, I decided to shake these fluid acrylics one day when I was doing an abstract painting, and yep, you see, it already got on my finger. The bottle was open at the top, and see how it's like bubbling out of there right now? Oh, it went everywhere. Over my artwork, over myself, everything. So don't do that. Make sure your bottle is closed. I'm like afraid to open it right now. So these are super duper thin. I don't want to use too much of it either. But you can see, so I'll brush these right here. See the peak on this one? Right, and I'm going to lift this up in a second. But you can see the peak on this one. It's stiff. It stays where it is. It's not quite an impasto paint, but it is super thick and creamy and brushes really, really well. Let me see here. My brush is a little bit stiff, but that's okay. But it brushes out really well. This one, you can see when I poured it, there is no peak. It lays flat a little bit. So this is your regular kind of fluid acrylic. And then this is high flow, high viscosity. So watch when I lean these paints up. Oh, I don't want them to run off the page. So see how far this one runs? This one doesn't move at all. And this one runs just a tiny bit. So I would say this consistency here in the fluid acrylics is pretty close, just a little bit. I would say it's pretty close to what I use for my swipe technique. This is super thin. This is like the consistency, a little bit thinner than the consistency of my paint and water. And then these heavy body are great to use for basically anything else in acrylic pouring. But again, they're very expensive. But I would definitely mix this with pouring medium. You could or could not mix this one with pouring medium if you chose. And this one has really good pigments to it, but you will only be able to make this paint a little bit thinner than your thickest pouring medium, if that makes sense. So this one is harder to control the consistency on. So this is something else to think about when you're thinking about the best paint you want to use for acrylic pouring. So this was a little bit on the viscosity test. Now I check my consistencies and things using my consistency worksheet that I have in my swipe technique course. But that is kind of yet another thing that you can think about for when you're choosing your paint. What viscosity is it for the technique that you want to do? Now I want to show you what I mean by cell reactive. So let me go get those. Okay. I wanted to show you what I mean by cell reactive. So what I have here, I'm going to pour down a color. This color could be any of the colors you choose up here, any of the ones I've talked about. So I'm using Amsterdam Phthalo Blue for this experiment. I have some red back here. I might, if I have enough room on the paper, I might test it out with red also, but this is also Pyrrole Red by Amsterdam. Now, I have all of these are mixed with paint and water, and I have Soho and Winsor and Newton Silver mixed together, about 40% Soho, 60% Winsor and Newton. This gives me the amount of cells that I like. And then I have Winsor and Newton mixed with Creative Inspirations. So if you remember back in the video, and I would rewatch this and write things down that I said, if you're that type of person, if you learn that way. But cell reactive paints for the colors are Soho, Winsor and Newton, Pebeo, Liquitex Basics, Liquitex Professional Series, those are all pretty reactive. And sometimes Arteza can be as well. That's kind of lumped in with the Liquitex Professional. So cell reactive paints create cells. I'm using paint and water here because I don't want to add any pouring mediums that could skew the experiment that also have cell reactive properties like Floetrol to it. So this is just paint and water mixed up, thin consistency like I would use on my blow dryer technique. So I'm going to pour down a color, pour down a little bit of one of the metallics over it. Now, this does not have to just work with metallics. The colors themselves, so if I were to use this red in Creative Inspirations, it is also cell reactive. And that's why I said that they're kind of harder to use as a base color because cells will pop through. But I'm going to take a color, and then I need to grab my white really quick, but I'm going to take just a regular color that's not cell reactive, mix it with something that is cell reactive, blow them over so that you can see. And then what I've done over here is this is just Winsor and Newton by itself that is not cell reactive. This paint is not cell reactive. So first thing I'll do is take two non-cell reactive paints, blow them over each other. I'll take a color, mix it with this, take a color, mix it with this, take a color and mix it with the Winsor and Newton. And so let's do it this way. Non-cell reactive, even though it's a metallic, and then cell reactive. Okay, if y'all know me, I can be a little bit messy, but I am going to try to bend down to blow these. So here is just Amsterdam and Amsterdam Pyrrole Red mixed together. And let me set them aside and blown over top of one another. Mixed together. They do not give many cells. Now, density may be at play. You see here, the phthalo blue is a transparent color and a little bit lighter, so it's trying to come to the surface, but that's fluid dynamics. That is not anything to do with the actual cellular properties of the paint. Next, I am going to do, let's do blue, red, and a little bit of Amsterdam titanium white. Now, Amsterdam titanium white can, oh, I needed to mix it up, can give some cells. Let's blow that one. So this is what I talked about earlier in the video, that it was, I called it the white sheep because I didn't want to call it a black sheep, but because it's not, because it's a great property, but it's different. It does, titanium white, because of its density, sinks through the other colors, allows the lighter colors to rise up, and you can get some cellular properties there. So that's why I love Amsterdam titanium white for my swipe catalyst in my swipe technique. So again, every paint brand is a little bit different, but titanium white, no others of Amsterdam create any cells when they mix together really, except the titanium white. Oxide black doesn't do that either. Okay, next I will do a little bit of the blue, a little bit of the red, and then the Winsor and Newton gold. And these are all mixed, same consistency. So this is Winsor and Newton by itself. So I'm going to set this over to the side. I have so much stuff out on my table. No cells. I hope that you can see this. Okay, my next one, I'm going to do, so I'm going to set this to the side because it does not give cells. It's a very pretty gold, but no cells. Now I'm going to use my Creative Inspirations mixed with Winsor and Newton together. So this is this, 60% this, 40% this. Let's do that one and see what that is like. I guess 4th of July is coming up. I'm doing like a red, white, and blue type theme here. Red, white, blue, and gold. Okay. Now, I'm going to do this together. Oh, I should have done it without the white to show you first, but because the white is also cell reactive, but whoops, I didn't blow that very well. But you can see the cells kind of starting to form. I want to do that again here and leave the white out so that you can see. And I want to blow a little bit better. I should have blown that a little bit better. Okay, yep, you can definitely start to see the cells come up here. These were from air bubbles. I do think I'm gonna drop it all. So it's hard to see, but it's starting to separate, and you can see the cells kind of starting to form around the edges. Kind of hard to tell there, though. Let me do it. Here. Okay, here you go. You can see the cells starting to form all around where the gold is. And here even too, you can see them. I just didn't blow this one very well, but you can see all those cells starting to form. Now here is Soho, silver, and this is mixed with, so pretend this is silver. It's mixed with Winsor and Newton and Soho. Again, 60% here, 40% here. And I'll do the same things here, here. And I'll leave the white out just so that we can see the pure, whoops, cell reaction here. Oh yeah, and you can start to see the formation almost immediately there. So that is what I mean, but this wasn't even a painting video, and somehow I have paint everywhere. So that's what I mean when I say you can group your paints together based on whether they are cell reactive or not. Okay, I've given you a lot of information. Let's regroup for how to choose the best paints for acrylic pouring. First thing, where are you located? Because you need to know what brands are in your area. So I would go on the internet, research a little bit, and figure out what brands are where you are located. Next thing, are you just starting out? Are you, trying to make this a profession or a career? Because that's going to depend on how much money you actually want to spend on the paint. So how much do the paints cost? I have been doing this for, my gosh, since February of 2018, and I still use mid-grade, student-grade paints because it depends on the technique that I'm doing. I like certain properties of certain paints, and it doesn't always, being a professional grade paint doesn't always, and being more expensive doesn't always mean it's going to serve me for what I'm trying to get done. I'm thinking more about the chemical properties, which leads me into the next thing. So we've talked about location. We've talked about how much you want to spend on it, whether you're a beginner and you're just going to use ready pour paints or something that's already pre-mixed, or whether you are truly trying to kind of grow and you're going to be using student grade or even professional grade paints. So location, the cost of the paint. The next thing is, what technique are you going to do and what are you going to be mixing it with? So you're going to want to think about the viscosity of the paint, like I showed you before. How thick or thin do you need the paint to be? Very thin, high flow acrylic paints, you are only going to get them as thick or even a little bit thinner than the pouring medium that you're using. You could add like some gloss gel or something to make it a thicker paint, but again, now you're adding more mediums, you're adding more money. There's no need to do that. So I would stick with either their regular, a regular fluid acrylic or a lower viscosity, a thicker paint acrylic. You can think about, along with that, on those same lines for technique, do I want cells and lacing in my painting? If so, maybe you use a more cell reactive brand like the ones that I talked about, either Soho, Creative Inspirations, sometimes Arteza, sometimes Liquitex Professional. So that is just something additionally to think about. If you're wanting a very specific technique like like my Dream Cloud series or like pearl cells, then you'll want to use some version of a satin enamel or sometimes house paint and Artist Love Flow Acrylic, or sometimes I use Creative Inspirations, something that is cell reactive as well, specifically for pearl cells. So thinking about the technique that you want. So wow, we've talked about your location. We have talked about the price of the paints. We've talked about the pouring medium that you're going to use, the technique that you're going to do, and what viscosity of the paint it is. We've talked about specific cell reactions that you can get with certain types of paints. So all of those things are going to go into what is the best paint to use. But honestly, if you are just starting out and you are experimenting around, any of these student grade paints that I talked about today that are predictable, so I would stay away for at least the base coat of ones that are super cell reactive. But your Amsterdam, I do like Creative Inspirations, Amsterdam, Creative Inspirations, Blix, Artist Loft, Liquitex Basics, any of those are okay for acrylic pouring. Once you really start to get into it and get more nuanced, then you can start or Winsor & Newton. Sorry, I missed that because that is one that I use quite often. Once you get a little bit more into it and really start honing in on what effects you like, then you can really start picking and choosing, mixing paints together. I get that question as well. I mix different brands within a painting and in itself in one painting, and that is possible too. So there are so many different things that go into it, but kind of I guess now it's the long answer, is that there isn't just one best paint to use. It's going to depend on all the factors that we talked about in this video. So save this video for later. If you like this type of content, give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment. Let me know if there are other videos like this that you would like for me to do, and I will try to do those for you. But hopefully you found this helpful. Hopefully next time you go to the art store, you won't be confused about what you're looking at on the shelf, if you can find a brick and mortar art store anymore at this point. But hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you everybody for watching. Happy painting.